Okay, great. Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you all for coming. First of all, a big thank you to Phil Morrison, who was the catalyst behind so many good things in the shul. And even though Phil's not in the executive anymore, he's still driving things in the shul. So well done, Phil. Yeah, that's number one. Number two, there's been refreshments put out. Somebody has also sponsored cholent. If you're watching this live, there will not be cholent at your house. You have to come here. Yeah. It's like, people are going into the oven and looking for cholent. They're like, the rabbi said there was cholent. How, did you bring cholent? The rabbi said there was supposed to be cholent here. Anyway, so there have been some courses. If anybody would like to put a donation in there, you don't have to. But if you do want to put a donation in there, you can do so later. That's number two. Number three, there are quite a number of people here saying Kaddish presently for a parent or for another loved one. If you would like, then tonight's shir will be dedicated in memory of those people. So first and foremost, I guess, because you were the one that arranged it, in memory of Phil's mommy. What was her name? Cleo. I knew Cleo. I'm looking for the Hebrew name. Chaya Bas. Chaya Bas Moshe. So it's in memory of Chaya Bas Moshe, but we'll mention we're missing Alan. Pardon? The Yotze candles for everybody, and we're going to really discuss this in general terms tonight, and not so much about Cleo. This is not really what it's about, but thank you very much, everyone who's come. It's really lovely to see that there's so many people here that want to hear about this, and that will hopefully enjoy and gain a lot from the shir. So I'd like to start with the following. First of all, we need to start to understand what Kaddish is. Once you understand what Kaddish is, what it says, we're going to discuss the origins of Kaddish. Then I want to discuss what Kaddish does for the soul in elevating the soul. And then the last thing, which will hopefully be the most contentious issue, but probably the most fun also to discuss, is women and Kaddish. Okay, so we're going to be discussing that as well. All that for tonight. Hi, Robert. Come on in. Do we have more chairs? We do. Okay. Right. So that's what we're hopefully planning to have tonight. As I said, thank you very much for everybody who's arranged it. And we're going to start with the following question. What is Kaddish? Before we ask the question why we say Kaddish, what does Kaddish mean? What are the words of Kaddish mean? I know it's Aramaic, so it's a little bit more complicated to understand it. But what do the words of Kaddish mean? For example, Yit Gadal Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah. Okay, so you have to be able to play a little bit with the words because it's Aramaic, as I said. Yit Gadal comes from the word of Gadol, right? Yit Gadal, it should become great. The Yit Kadash comes from the word Kadosh. Kadosh means holy. So Yit Gadal means it should become great. Yit Kadash means it should become holy. Shemei, like Shemo, the name of Shem, because it's the Aramaic, so it's got the hay at the end. Rabbah is the great name, his great name. Be'alma, like Ba'olam, in the world. Be'alma divrach, you say, in the world that he created, like his will. V'yamlich be'malchutei, which he then reigned upon in his kingship. B'chayechon, in our lives, v'yomechon, in your days, b'chayechon, Beit Yisrael, in the days of all the Jewish people. Ba'gala, immediately, of his non-karv, or speedily soon, v'imru, and they say, Amen. And then the entire community says the following. So whoever's leading the Kaddish says to everybody else, may the name of Hashem be made great. And the community responds, what? Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach L'Olam Olomei Omaya. Right? Yehei, may, Shmei. Again, we said Shmei before in the beginning, the name. Rabbah, his great name. Mevarach, blessed. L'Olam, in this world. Olomei Omaya, in the world to come, forever and ever. It may be blessed forever and ever. So the idea of the Kaddish is really, as it says, a sanctification of a Kodesh Baruch Hu's name. That's what the idea of the Kaddish is. Now, what are the sources, or where's the root of the idea of Kaddish? So there's an interesting story that's brought in the Seder Dorot. Again, to be taken literally, maybe as Agata, it's not to be taken absolutely literally, but Rabbi Akiva was once going past a cemetery. And in that cemetery, he saw a man who was walking, carrying a large bundle of wood, and he wasn't clothed either. And Rabbi Akiva was looking at this apparition, and he's looking at this fellow and says, this is really strange. I mean, I think all of us could agree. Even in modern day, this would look really, really strange. Okay, you've gone one step too far. So he walks over to the fellow, and he says to him, who are you? And the fellow says, I can't talk to you now. I'm in a rush. He says, why are you in a rush? He goes, my taskmaster is really, really strict. He goes, okay, I'm asking you to stop anyway, to talk to me. I want to know what this is all about. So he says, okay, my name is Ukva, and I was a tax collector in my city. And in the city that I was in the olden days, taxes, and that's part of the reason, I think one of the reasons Jews have such an aversion to taxes were never collected fairly. And we as Jews often got it over the head. And many times also the rich people got out of paying taxes because they smeared a little bit. And the poor people then had to make up for the taxes that the rich people didn't pay. So being a tax collector, even today, is a thankless job. We know people that have worked for the HMRC. We don't like them. Where is he? Yeah? Yeah? No, we didn't say anything. We didn't say anything. Right? Yep. Yeah, he's so crazy. But that's a separate discussion. But nobody, even nowadays, people, we don't like paying tax, but at least today you say, look, the HMRC takes the tax. Everybody gets taxed hopefully fairly. Everybody gets taxed equally, hopefully. You'll ask the accountants if that's true or not. But in general, it's the same for everyone. But this fellow was really disliked, and he was obviously maybe a bit of a moser as well, etc. He caused people a lot of trouble. And he said, every day I have to gather in wood, and then I get burnt on that wood day in, day out, every single day. He says, well, is there any way out of this? It sounds horrible. How can you get out of this? He says, I don't know if I have a son, but if I did have a son, and he said, Yehei Shmei Rabba, may HaKadosh Baruch Hu's great name be blessed, then and only then would I be able to get out of this issue. So he says, what's your name? He says, again, I said, my name is Ukva, and he says his wife's name, and he tells him the town that he's from, and Rabbi Kiva decides to come and try out to see what the story is. And he comes to this town, and he says, anybody ever hear of this guy Ukva? And fill in the blank, people didn't have very, very nice things to say about him. Obviously, he came in, you mentioned the fellow, this guy caused untold sorrows to all of the Jewish people. He was persona non grata, even after his death. So it says, what about his wife? Oh, the Rashanta, and then they started, yeah, but where does she live? Well, she lives in such and such a place. So he goes and he finds the wife, and he speaks to the wife, and he says, do you by any chance have a child? He says, yeah. When Ukva died, I was pregnant, and we left behind the son. And he tried to teach the son, and he couldn't teach the son. And in the end, after a lot of prayer and a lot of doing, he was able to teach the son Shema and Torah, and he taught him Kaddish. And after he was able to teach him Kaddish, he was able to then release the soul of this individual, and this individual did not have to go through that anymore. Okay, that is the story. Again, to be taken as a story in the Agadata, so whether you want to take it absolutely literally or when you want to take it allegorically is a different discussion. It's not for tonight. Whether we take all the things that are Agadata, which is all the things that are in the Gemara that are more sort of, let's say, esoteric, not all the esoteric parts of the Gemara to be taken literally. Okay, so this is a separate discussion whether this is or isn't to be taken literally, but not for tonight. Moving on. So that's the story. That is the background behind this Kaddish. That's where it comes from. And so now we know what we were trying to do with saying Kaddish, and we also know what the origins of the Kaddish are. So now we get on to the next question, which is, why do we say Kaddish? So what does this Kaddish do? What does the Kaddish do for the soul? So I think in order to understand this, we need to take another step further back and try to understand ourselves before we try to understand what Kaddish does. We are, please.
There's two types, the rabbinical Kaddish and the Kaddish that you were mentioning.
Yeah, we're getting to that later. We're gonna get to that.
Okay, I'll leave you.
Even the rabbinical Kaddish in its even the rabbinical, you're asking a good question, but even the rabbinical Kaddish in its purest form it's all about sanctifying God's name. Just the rabbinical Kaddish will come after learning, whereas the mourner's Kaddish will come after a certain point, and then you still have two other Kaddish, which is the half Kaddish and the full Kaddish, which will come, the half Kaddish just sometimes as a break in certain parts between davening, and the full Kaddish saying Tiskabat, Tzavos, and may our prayers be accepted, comes usually after Shemona Esrei. So after Shachris, Mincha, Mariv, after Shemona Esrei, it's the only time you'll say full Kaddish. But at their root, even though, yes, there are variations, at the root, it's all the sanctification of Kodesh Baruch Hu's name, with extra prayers added in. So the Rabbanan Kaddish is a special prayer that was said after learning, which has a prayer for the rabbis, Al Yisrael and the Jewish people, about Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan, Al Tamidim, and the Tamidim, and Al Tamidei Tamidim, and their Talmidim, some of their students. Now, I say everybody who's busy learning Torah, in this land, and every other land. They should have tremendous amount of peace, etc. These are all blessings given to Rabbanon. So that's a separate thing that we say after learning. But at its root, it's still Kaddish plus an extra prayer.
And it's in Arabic, and again, not in Hebrew.
Yeah, they're all in Arabic. Even that is in Arabic. All the Kaddish in Aramaic. And again, they'll have the extra bits and pieces, but again, all of them will be in Aramaic. Okay. So now we want to take a step back, and we said, so everybody has a job in this world. Everybody is born to fulfill a certain job. And God, for those of you who've learned Derech Hashem, you've heard this probably numerous times and quite in depth, and we're not going to go anywhere near in depth to what we could go about this. But the idea basically is that God has given every single person their personality, their faults, their strengths, and put that person in a specific place, so the fact that you were born in Manchester in the year 19 whatever, I know there's a big variance over here, so I'm not saying anything specific, but we were all born in 19 whatever it was. So the fact that each one of us is born when they were born, to the family we were born with our own personalities, etc., is all part of God's test in putting you on this world. And your job on this world is to gain God consciousness, and gaining God consciousness is done by doing the mitzvahs, and more importantly, it's how you do the mitzvahs, developing your character, many other things that come with it, and living life as a moral and as a Torah Jew. Okay, that is what we're here to do. At the end of our lives, we go to a place that's called Olam HaNeshamas. That's not Olam Haba. There's a mistake that's made. People think that when people die, they go straight to Olam Haba. That's not 100% correct. Olam Haba is a much later point. Again, we're not discussing that tonight because that's a separate share about Mashiach, Olam Haba, etc. However, the idea is when a person passes away, the soul and the body split. The body remains here on this world. That's where we bury, but we still give it a tremendous amount of holiness because it was the vessel that contained the holiness of a soul and a real live human being. So we're not just an animal. It's not just another thing that died. Whereas the soul goes to a place, if we call it a place, that's called Olam HaNeshamas, the world of Neshamas, in which there are different stages. You have what's called Gehenna, which is purgatory, if you want to call it that. And you can have Gan Eden, Elyon, and Gan Elyon Tachla, the upper and lower spheres of Gan Eden. And a person, after they pass away, God has a look and he says, okay, let's give you an assessment. Let's figure out where you're at. Did you do the job you were supposed to do? Did you live up to your expectations? Did you even outdo your expectations? Did you fall short of your expectations? We're going to know, we're going to look, and God does everything with a very, very exact measure, which we can't really understand. Again, a lot of time spent on it, a lot of ink spilt on it in Derech Hashem, explaining exactly how the entire judgment in heaven goes. And then once you're done, then God decides sometimes a person needs to go to Gehenna to be purged of the sins or the wrongdoings that they've done. Sometimes it can go directly to Gan Eden, and sometimes it's a process where first you go to Gehenna and then you go to Gan Eden. But either which way, we say the maximum time for a righteous person or for an evil person really to be in Gehenna is 12 months, which is why we specifically say Kaddish only for 11 months, never to imply about a specific individual that they might be evil. And the Kaddish that you're saying says the following. There is another thing that you can do, right? So let's put it this way. Let's talk in terms of money, and then we'll come back to other things. I was reading a book, and in this book, it's a book about finances, and the fellow there says, I have a lot of little soldiers that work for me to make money, and they're called my money. And what he basically says is, I employ my money if you invest your money correctly or you put it in the right kind of things. Your money will then automatically, passively create more money, as opposed to just putting it sometimes in the bank where you get absolutely zero. You can put it into property, you can put it into stocks, whatever it is. It's irrelevant what you're investing in. That's not for tonight again, and it's not for me to be discussing that either. I'm not financially, I'm not that aware of these things. However, what his main point is that you can create an army that's working in the background 24 hours a day to make more money for you. And he says, and the truth is, the same is true. In the same way it's true in financially, it's true for us as well. We can leave things behind that make a difference. So, for example, you can leave behind a sefer. Rashi has left a lasting legacy in this world. For the past 900 years, anybody who is learning Talmud will be learning it with Rashi. Anybody who's learning Chumash, even on a basic level, one of the first places to turn is to go to Rashi. And so therefore, even though you say, well, Rashi died 900 years ago, yeah, but he's got his little army that's constantly accruing things for him because he's left an impression in the world that's on a constant basis adding to his merits. Similarly, it doesn't even have to be in a spiritual sense. Let's say somebody gave a lot of money and built a shul, built a mikveh, helped a charity be set up, helped an organization be set up. So you have an organization that's set up and that runs because I originally put in the first 50,000 pounds to make sure this organization had a building was able to run. All of the good charity work that this organization does in perpetuity, God is going to say some of that reward comes back to you. Because had you not thrown in the first 50 grand, the organization would have never started. If it would never started, it wouldn't have been helping people for the last 20, 30, 50 years, however long it is. And even after 120, as long as this organization keeps on going and keeps on doing good things for people, it accrues into your bank account. Because it's you who started this organization. It's you who gave them their initial funding. That's financially. Now we have another set of people that could be doing things for us. And those are children. If you leave behind a child, male or female, that does something positive. We're not on Kaddish now. It could be Kaddish, but it could be many other things. You leave behind a child. Let's say you had a child and that child, for whatever reason, he wanted to go to yeshiva and he became a rabbi, and you enabled that child to go and to become who he became because you helped that child financially become who they were. You supported them, you gave them the emotional support necessary, you gave them the financial support necessary, and then they become a famous rabbi that goes all over the world saying drushes and inspiring people, etc., etc. Every bit of inspiration that child gives goes to your merit. We'll go even deeper, by the way, and this is a really important point. The Gemara tells us another story about Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says that he wants to go learn, or his wife Rachel says you need to go learn. Well, okay, fine, he goes to learn for 12 years, he has 12,000 students, and he comes home, and as he's at the door of his house, he hears his wife speaking, and the neighbor's wife says to his wife, what kind of guy did you marry? He left you, went away for 12 years to learn. What kind of terrible person is this? And she says to him, if it was up to me, let him learn another 12 years. Rabbi Akiva turns around, goes back home, learns another 12 years, comes back with 24,000 students. Now he comes to this city. Rabbi Akiva is the greatest rabbi in his generation. And he comes to this city, and it seems that people didn't know who his wife was. And he comes and he walks in, and this woman throws herself at his feet, and people come and like, no! They start getting all upset. What are you doing? Throwing yourself at the feet of the great rabbi. And what Rabbi Akiva says, he realizes as his wife, he says, move over there, move out of the way. He says, why? Because Shali, mine, says Rabbi Akiva, Veshalachem, and all of you 24,000 students, Shalahu. It's really all her merit. It's not my merit. I only was able to do this because I had my wife behind me who was giving me the support, and it was pushing me on and saying, you're great, keep on going. If I didn't have that, and this is why even spouses, you share a part in each other's goodness and each other's share in the world to come, because it is each spouse that gives the other one the power to be able to do what they can do. So it's a very, very important thing. All this is really, really important. And so you leave behind a child. After 120, not you, Chas v'Shalom, we're talking about, hypothetically speaking, a person passes away and they leave behind a child. And that child does something positive in this world. God says, you've left behind someone that is leaving a positive influence in this world. And therefore, even though you are not around at the moment, you still deserve some reward for that. And therefore, after 120, you'd say, well, this person's died. Once he's died, it's finished. The bank account is closed. End of the fiscal year. End of story. Not so. Anything that children do, regardless of whether it is or it isn't for the merit of the soul of their parent, but if they do it because, and they're able to do it because their parent has given them that education, or they're doing it for their parent, gets partially credited to the parent as well. Which is why when a parent passes away, it's such a wonderful thing that a child is able to say Kaddish. But the idea of the Kaddish is not so much that we're saying something for the parents. We're making God's name great in the world. But God says, you've left behind an individual that is sanctifying my name, that is making my name great and my name be known in the world. You deserve credit for that, for leaving behind a child that does such a thing. And therefore, on a constant basis, every time another Kaddish is said, that is automatically added to the bank account, the heavenly bank account of the person that's passed away.
Does that continue with the grandparents, great-grandparents, and great-grandparents infinitum, or does it have to stop?
It's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that question. I would say maybe. I don't know, because the question really is, did the grandparents have an effect? Sometimes the grandparents did have an effect and they caused this, so then yes. Sometimes the grandparents had nothing to do with it, and you say, well, it was the parents, but you wouldn't go back 3 generations ago. There's really no connection between them. So I don't know is the honest answer. I would guess sometimes yes.
Because people do say Kaddish for grandparents.
Oh, no. So one second. Let me rephrase that. If you say Kaddish for a great grandfather, that goes to their account. No question. The question is a general Kaddish. You're saying, well, I'm saying generally Kaddish, and my parents are the ones that left me here, so therefore it goes to my parents' account. Does it also go to my grandparents' account? Because my parents are only who they were because they had parents. And my grandparents are only who they were because they had parents. So how far back are you going to go? But if I want to say Kaddish specifically, anybody I want to say Kaddish for, I can say Kaddish for and give them that merit. That I could do. I just don't know if a standard Kaddish is like, is it like almost a Ponzi scheme that splits out and that keeps on going and going and going? Or does it go to the parents or maybe the grandparents and it stops somewhere?
That's what he says it used to.
I'm coming back to you in a second.
When you do used to, then you can say for aunts, uncles, brothers.
Yeah. You can do that. You can do that if you want to. You can do it for anybody in memory of anybody. Yeah, Rodney.
What's your view then on people who don't have children, people who, or a child that dies and doesn't have any merits of their own,
right?
And no one to say Kaddish for them.
Yes.
Or people who are poor and can't afford to set up a shul or anything like that.
Right. Okay.
They can't do anything.
Right. Okay. So there are, I think there's 3 different questions, and we'll try to deal with each one of them separately. So the question was people who don't have children. The second question was children who pass away sadly, and the third one was somebody who doesn't have the money to set anything up. Right. So to each one, we'll say, I guess, its own answer. Somebody who sadly doesn't have children, you can't blame them for not having children. Oftentimes it is, it was out of their hand. Most couples that I know that have not had children have not done so out of choice. In general, it's never a choice that people make. And so therefore, if people don't have children, then, God will take that into account, and they leave behind other people. They can bequeath money to someone to say Kaddish for them, so they can let somebody else still, they can perpetuate themselves in a way, either with money, and we'll get to the fact if somebody doesn't have money in a minute, either by leaving behind money, say, well, you don't have children, but I leave behind money to do something good, that will be my perpetuity. Or, if, they could get people to say Kaddish for them, even if they don't leave them any money, right? That's the first point. A child who passes away, again, why the child had to live such a short life, and then, it could very well be that this child is a Gilgal, might be already, a reincarnation of somebody else. We don't know why the child had to have such a short life, and the child's not left any children. So the parents can say Kaddish for that child, siblings can say Kaddish for the child, other people can do things in the merit of that child. So there's nobody that sort of is left without. And if you could say somebody without money says, well, if I'm left without money, you said, if I have money, I can create a great charitable organization. I don't have money. How am I supposed to create this great charitable organization? Organizations aren't only created with money. They're created with a lot of talent. They're created with a lot of sweat and tears. And they're created with a lot of endurance and energy. And so that if a person says, well, I don't have money. Okay, but do you have physical energy that you can give? Do you have time that you can give? Do you have expertise that you can give? You can give something even if you don't have money. I don't think there's anybody out there, even that doesn't have money, that's got nothing to give. If somebody really feels they have nothing to give, I think we need to have a serious discussion, because I think everybody has something they can give. And well, you say, well, I got nothing I can give to the shul. Okay, do you have something you can give to another organization? Do you have something you can give to the Fed? Something you can give to the Friendship Circle? Something you can give to CST? Time? Okay, but time is something that might not perpetuate itself, but it's also in creating things. So there are lots of other things that you can put in motion with your time, energy, and who you are. That's not based on money.
But there are, I mean, there's those people that would say people who are mentally retarded or retarded
right.
or whatever, you know, and who can't. And
okay, so then the question is, so you're asking a good question. So the people who are mentally retarded or have other issues and for whatever reason cannot do these things for themselves, then God takes that into account as well. God doesn't say, hey, I sent you down, you didn't do a job. I mean, you just acted like a retarded person the whole time. No, who do you think made him retarded? Yeah? It was obviously that Kaddish Baruch Hu that did that as well. So that's all taken into account, and they must have some form of either job that they have to do that involves not so much them being active at something, but them having an effect on other people, which they will have an easier time doing, rather than us that have to try hard to get things right. Okay, they will have their own, God has his own plan for them. And it's not to run an organization, and it's not to be a big charitable person. It's maybe not to be saying Kaddish or to be a teacher, etc., etc. But that doesn't mean they don't have a reason or they don't have a purpose. They do have a purpose. Just their purpose is very, very different. Now, what is their purpose? We don't know exactly what their purpose is. But we know that God is just, and God won't put somebody on this earth, not give them any talents, and then say, ha, you had no talents, you couldn't do anything, so I'm not going to give you any reward. Because that sounds unfair.
You just mentioned something quite interesting, Gilgal Neshama.
Okay, I don't want to get into Gilgal Neshama too much.
Because, okay, but then if somebody comes back down on
yes.
another form,
okay,
then how does that affect?
How does that affect what?
Or the Neshama or the world.
It's very complicated, because the Neshama might be version 1, version 2 of the Neshama. Which version of the Neshama gets schar, and how does it work? And there's two bodies. It's really complicated. The Derech Hashem speaks about it. It's not for now. It is a very complicated question. It's a good question, but Robert, did you want to ask something? Robert, I saw you making a face before. Did you want to ask something? Robert, Nathan, did you have a question before? No? Okay, Russell.
I have a question.
Yeah, you did have a question. I thought you looked like you had a question before. You were going to say?
What's the situation?
And Russell, you'll be next. And then we'll finish with the questions for now.
3 times a day.
Pardon?
If you're in that situation, you're a mourner, you try to say Kaddish 3 times a day.
Yes.
Chocolate, milk, and marriage.
Yeah.
What's the situation if you can only say you work out of town, you can't get to shul, you can't find a minyan?
Yes.
Is it okay to say it to yourself?
Okay.
Does it matter as long as you say it 1 time a day, 2 times a day? What's the
Okay, so there's 2 separate questions. Number 1, can you say Kaddish to yourself? The answer to the question is no, you cannot. Because the point of Kaddish is, remember, that's what we started with. The point of Kaddish is asking a minyan of men to sanctify God's name and for them to say, yes, Amen, Yehei Shmei Rabba. You can't do that for yourself. It just doesn't make any sense. Okay? It doesn't work. Right? That's point number 1. Point number 2 is you say, well, there are times where a person will be out of town, where a person will be indisposed, he might be ill, whatever it is, they might not be able to say Kaddish. So what are they supposed to do? So either they can ask somebody else to say Kaddish on their behalf, and how many times you say Kaddish, the more the merrier, right? If you can come every day to davening Shachar, Mincha, Maariv, and say Kaddish all the time, every Kaddish you say is an extra merit for the parent. Is there a minimum? Yeah, you should try it at least once a day. If you say all of them, brilliant. If you don't say any of them, the parent is sort of saying, why aren't you doing anything for me? But sometimes you're stuck and you won't be able to, and if you won't be able to, you won't be able to. You can't. I know people that literally turn their entire lives around for 1 year to be able to say Kaddish no matter what. And if you can do that, great, but not everybody can do that. So it really depends on your circumstances. But if you can't do that, then you can ask somebody else to be saying Kaddish on your behalf, or try to find another way or something else, which we'll speak about soon for you to do for that parent. Yeah, Russell, last question. And then we'll continue. Yes, please.
So Kaddish elevates the neshama of the departed.
Yes.
Right. And it's quite a powerful thing.
Yes.
Right. Why do we only do it on your side? Why can't we do it whenever we want?
So the truth is you can do it whenever you want. So what's good? The minhag is, so that we'll get to Yartzeit in a second. So Yartzeit is a time where it's like you have a new Rosh Hashanah. Yartzeit becomes the Rosh Hashanah of that neshama. And God has a look at what has happened during the year, and God rebalances it. So, during the year you get paid, and then once a year we do a review. And at the end of the year review, we can look and goes, hey, you've been performing really, really well. I'm going to give you a promotion. Or, hey, you've been doing really, really badly. You're going to be demoted. You're going to be working now in a worse area of this business. So every year the Yartzeit. So by the Yartzeit, we want to say Kaddish because when the neshama has this Rosh Hashanah, we want to be adding to it. We want to be giving it extra zuchusim. If you want to say Kaddish always, you can. And I know in Israel, amongst the Sfardim, I don't know if it's the Russians also, we had Russians also, but definitely amongst the Sfardim, once you start saying Kaddish, they keep saying Kaddish. They'll say at least one Kaddish at every tefillah, no matter what they do, even though they're not available. They'll always say Kaddish. By the Ashkenazim, you say for the 11 months, you take the break for that 12th month, and then in general, you say it only at the Yartzeit. But if you wanted to, by all means, you can say Kaddish anytime you want to for your parents. And every time you do say Kaddish, it'll do something for them. It's just in the first 11 months, the minhag is much stronger that you should be saying Kaddish for them during that time where they are slowly finding their foothold and helping them out of any problems that they might be in. Afterwards, it's not a minhag that's as strong to say Kaddish, but if you wanted to, by all means, you could. Okay, coming back now to what we were saying. Now, we get on to the last point, which is, I think we've discussed all the other points I wanted to discuss. Any other question before we get to women saying Kaddish? Because that's yeah.
If unfortunately, so you've lost one parent.
Yes.
And during the 11 months, you lose the second parent.
Yeah.
So obviously, when you say your Kaddish,
yeah,
can you say the Kaddish for both souls?
I guess that's what you'll have to do. You don't really have much of a choice. You can't split yourself in two.
Yeah.
Unless you go to 2 minyanim. I mean, there are people that literally that will sit through a second minyan, or they'll go to one of these MHs, they'll say Kaddish at their own minyan, and then skip over to another minyan and say a few more Kaddishes just to be able to catch in for one for the father, one for the mother. You can if you want to, but again, time, we're all limited by time. We you can't just sit in shul all day long saying Kaddish. So yeah, if you want to, you could. Okay, now we get to the question then. Therefore, yeah. Sorry, Steph. I was going to go on, but I think we should take the one more question before we get to the ladies' issue. Yeah.
I was going to ask, what's the situation? I know women can't be time bound for.
Yes.
What's the situation if a woman wants to say Kaddish at some point?
Okay, so we're getting to that now.
Yeah.
We're going to get to that now. Okay, so let's move on to that part of the shir, which is Kaddish something that's only for men? Okay, traditionally it has been, although I spoke to my chavrusa, who I learned with 2-3 years ago. He's now moved to London, and he's Dain Lichtenstein's son-in-law, who told me in Dain Lichtenstein's name, who said in the name of his father, who still lived in Europe, he says he remembers that in Bialystok, ladies came to say Kaddish. So if you were to say, well, this is a modern 2000 and whatever invention that women say Kaddish, not necessarily. There is in halacha a very big discussion whether women can or cannot say Kaddish. In general, some of the people that are more machmer say absolutely not. Women cannot say Kaddish, and it's wrong for them to say Kaddish. And if they say Kaddish, you have to go to the mechitza and you have to tell them they have to stop, etc., etc. The other side says, no, you can say Kaddish. It's okay if you want to. Again, women don't have the obligation as men do. Okay, so that, men...
Does it do any good, though?
Yes, it does. Of course it does. Of course it does, right? But there's no point in saying it just to feel good about yourself. But there is an important point to be made over there, which with that, and that's not only for ladies, it'll be for men also. This is very, very important. So we'll come to that in a minute. And that is, let's tackle that point now. Does it do any good? The answer is, well, if you're allowed to do it, yes, it will do. If you're not supposed to do it, then it doesn't do any good, right? But I think we take it, I know Chief Rabbi is taking the view, London Bezna is taking the view, and I think, in general, people do take the view that women can say Kaddish, and as somebody asked me probably a couple of years ago already, do we allow, I got this, sometimes you get these people on Facebook that throw these things at you. Rabbi, I found this. Do you allow women to say Kaddish by you or not? There's somebody that made some kind of fuss. The answer is we have had women saying Kaddish here. I know Jennifer Marin comes and says Kaddish when she's got yahrzeit. Adam Levine's sister came. I know that Carrie says Kaddish sometimes, as well as Abby saying Kaddish. I'm not sure. There's not that many ladies in shul that say Kaddish, which is why I can sort of count them on one hand. If they want, again, yeah, I think there are what's called. There are women that come. Mel has come. I think Mel came also when she had yahrzeit, if I remember correctly. So
you have to do it in a minyan.
Pardon?
You have to have a minyan.
Yeah. So this is what we're getting to. They have to have it in a minyan, but more importantly, and this is the point that Michelle was making. This very to say, does it make that? Will it make an impact? The answer is yes. It will make an impact if, and this if is not only for women, it's for men also, and it's very important. The idea of Kaddish is to be asking a minyan to respond to your Kaddish. Many times, Kaddish turns into this big balagan where everybody's in a different thing. And there's two people answering to your Kaddish and two people answering to his Kaddish and two people answering to that guy's Kaddish. And nobody really has a minyan of people answering to their Kaddish, which really makes it almost irrelevant. It's much more important that people should try to say Kaddish in unison. And therefore, and that will then apply to women as it applies to men. So men should be trying to say Kaddish in unison. And then whatever woman there is that's trying to say Kaddish should have to try to fit in with another man who's saying Kaddish, so that if somebody responds Yehesh Me'Rabbah, they're not only responding Yehesh Me'Rabbah to them, they're responding Yehesh Me'Rabbah to what you've said as well. Because if nobody hears what you're saying, and nobody responds to what you're saying, then then there's no point in what you're doing. But that's not because you're a woman. That's because nobody's responded to your Kaddish.
So if the Shat says it for everybody,
yes,
then does that fulfill the obligations of other people saying Kaddish?
No, so there are different obligations.
There's no other Kaddish.
Okay, so there are different obligations. So there's two things over here. Number one, there's different obligations as it comes to the Kaddish. The obligation of the Shliach Tzibur to say Kaddish is for specific Kaddishim within the davening, and then you have what's called the Kaddish Yosem that the mourner says. In certain shuls, namely very much by the Yekkes, the German Jews are very into that. But I remember even our yeshiva our yeshiva was a Yekkish yeshiva. So the yeshiva that I went to, they would give out the Kaddish to different people. So Kaddish after Aleinu was given out to one person only. And that person got to say Kaddish and nobody else got to say Kaddish with it. And this way you ensured that person said Kaddish, everybody answered Amen to his Kaddish, everybody was on speed with his Kaddish, etc., etc. The other shuls that don't do that rely on the fact that they will say Kaddish and that other people will say Kaddish and that everybody will say it in tandem. You don't say it in tandem as an issue, right? But that's, again, there is a point in them saying Kaddish, but you have to follow the formula. Yeah, Ian and then Rodney. Yeah.
If you take, for example, in our shul at Mari,
yeah,
we might have, say, 15 people there.
Yeah.
At the moment, about 9 or 10 of which are saying Kaddish.
Yeah.
So there isn't a minyan to respond.
Okay,
there's more people at the moment saying Kaddish.
Okay, but you have to say that. Even if you had 9 and 1, you'd have the same problem, right? The answer is that everybody's saying Yehesh Me'Rabbah for each other as well. It's because we're saying it together, so we all say Yehesh Me'Rabbah for each other, so we all count for each other as well. Rodney.
I'm going to ask this question.
Go on.
I can't see.
Go on.
A minyan of men, and there's none of them saying Kaddish, but
yes,
there happens to be a lady there that is saying Kaddish.
Yeah. Okay. So the chief rabbi is given that. So no, it's a good question. So in the chief rabbi's guidelines in the book, you can look it up. There's a book on the United Synagogue website. The chief rabbi's guidelines is done together with London Bezdin is that women should not be saying Kaddish on their own. However, if there's a woman in the shul that wants to say Kaddish and there are no men that are saying Kaddish, there almost always will be somebody there that could say Kaddish. Meaning I don't say Kaddish because Baruch Hashem I still have both my parents. But there are plenty of people in shul that don't say Kaddish but could say Kaddish. So if the woman then makes herself known to Adam, to Ian, whoever it is, to myself and says, look, I'm saying Kaddish, can you arrange for a man to say Kaddish so that I can say Kaddish? The answer is yes, we will arrange for that and we'll make sure that it happens. That's not an issue. So it's not so much of the woman, we're not going to stop the woman from saying Kaddish, but we'll just have another man saying Kaddish with her.
So a woman on her own can't say Kaddish?
According to there are different discussions about that, but Chief Rabbi's guideline says, the London Bezdin is taking the view that no.
So why don't we encourage it?
Why don't we encourage it? We're getting to that. Okay. Now, the question, and this is an important question that I'm getting to. This is what I was up to now. There's two things in Judaism, well, I wouldn't say in Judaism, but there's two things often. There's can you and should you. Right? There are two different questions. Can I do certain things? Yeah. Should I be doing them? Maybe yes, maybe no. Okay? So here's the question. I think, should you be doing these things? And I think it's a very individual answer, this one. Should you or shouldn't you? And different people feel differently about it. A lady sent me an email today that said, when my father passed away, I felt desperate to say Kaddish. I felt I had to do it, and the rabbi supported me, and I said Kaddish. We've had plenty of ladies who've never even come to me to ask the question, say, can we not? And if they had come and said, can you say Kaddish? The answer is, yeah, you want to say Kaddish, you can say Kaddish. I'm not going to stop you. Okay? However, I would say a few things. Number one, and this is really important, what Kaddish is for men, or what it's meant to be for men, is a daily thing to be done. And therefore, I would say if a woman chooses to say Kaddish, that's fine. But what I would say to that woman at the same time is, find something you'll do on a daily basis, because there are very few women that I know that come on a daily basis to davening. I have seen them, and it's not that they can't, and you're welcome any day to come to davening by us. We always have a women's section, and if we don't, we'll just move one on the mechitza. We always have the mechitza more or less in place, and if there's ever a woman that comes that needs just moving one more mechitza, and we'll have a women's section. And we'll always make room for women, and we'll move the men up, and we'll always have room for women in our shul. It just happens to be that we don't have women coming every single day. But I remember in America when I lived there were certain people that used to come on a daily basis. On the other hand, some of the ladies that I mentioned to you before, they came for yard site. Maybe once in a while they'll come, during Avelis to say Kaddish. They didn't come every day to say Kaddish, which is fine because they don't have an obligation to say Kaddish every day. But what I would say, therefore, is if you're not saying Kaddish every day, isn't it a shame not to be doing something else on those days that you're not saying Kaddish? Okay, so fill in the gaps.
So
my wife,
woman's minion, you can't.
No, women's minion don't work.
Women don't say. You can't
No, you can't say Kaddish. Kaddish needs to be with the davar should be kedusha, like baruch hu, like kedusha, like other things. It needs to have 10 men answering to the Kaddish. So you can't have a women's minion with Kaddish with 10 women. Doesn't work. Like you can't have kedusha and other things. What you can do, my wife has. I was going to bring it, I forgot to bring it, but my wife has. There's something that you can say, praying for the elevation of the soul of a departed one. My wife has it on her notice board, and it says, everything I do today positive should be a merit for the elevation of my father's soul. And she says that every single morning. And she says to her, it gives a tremendous amount of comfort, because I don't have to go to shul and say Kaddish. Because if I wake up this morning and I daven, part of that will go to my father's elevation of my father's soul. If I make a bracha, it'll go to the elevation of my father's soul. If I bench, if I do something for my children, if I give tzedakah, if I teach someone, whatever I do. And to me, and my wife said, she just feels there's much more value for money on that one, because it's an all day thing. Now, does that mean you shouldn't come and say Kaddish? No, I didn't say you shouldn't come and say Kaddish. What I am saying is that there's a lot of other things you can do as well, so that even if you feel, well, Kaddish doesn't work for me for whatever reason within my schedule, I won't make it after 7:45 to be able to say Kaddish, and I don't think that Machzika Adasso has a minyan at 10. Then we'll see. We'll take too friendly to my coming there. Ronnie, maybe you can convince them. You think? Yeah. I don't think the Torah way they would go with that one, would they?
I don't want to come out alive when they go.
All right, there we go. Same here. We don't, and I know that we don't do that. But all right, but that's what I'm saying. It's very individual. So, I would never, and I think this is an important thing, especially for women. Women are not obligated to say Kaddish. And therefore, if they cannot manage to say Kaddish, nobody should ever make them feel bad. Whereas with men, I would make them feel bad. As a rabbi, I would say, look, you have an obligation to come and say Kaddish. So, well, that's hard for me. Yeah, okay. But your parents pushed themselves for you. Why don't you do it? It's your obligation to do it for them. A woman says, I can't manage. Fine, you can't manage. You're not obligated. I'm not gonna give you a hard time for it. You can do something else. Say, yeah, but what about the elevation of my parents' soul? There's so much you can do. There's so many things that we mentioned. So it actually, and I often say this, the onus is on men to get it right, not on women to try to catch up with men.
Women's Draker is greater than man's.
That's a separate discussion as well, absolutely. But women are not obligated to do this. And so if they're not obligated to do this, if they want to, great. If they don't, also fine. It's really individual. Whereas for men, there's a much greater obligation. And we say, where are you? Why aren't you coming to say Kaddish if you could? Okay?
But a woman can have a mezuzah together.
Yes.
Women can make
yes.
a mezuzah.
Yeah.
So how come they can do that? Whereas
Okay, so the answer to that question is there are certain things that are known as davar shebikdusha. There are certain things that need a minyan specifically, and certain things don't. Mezumin doesn't need a minyan, whereas Kaddish does need a minyan. A minyan is defined as 10 men over the age of 13, and therefore, since Kaddish needs a minyan, it needs 10 men. Mezumin does not need a minyan, therefore women can do it on their own as well. 3 women can decide we want to bench together, and that's fine. And I know in certain places, I don't know that it's so frequent, but I know places where women do make a mezumin. And again, you want to make a mezumin, fine, no issue. You don't have to. Okay. The other thing that I would say, and this is a very important, and this is maybe a little bit more of a contentious point, and that is always ask yourself the question: am I doing what I should be doing? That I'm now looking beyond that to fill another gap. Meaning, we all have gaps, right? But the question is, if you got a test, if you got something that you need to do and you turn the page to the last page, you go, oh, extra credit, that's the one I'm going to fill in. Okay, it's very nice to fill in the extra credit, but you got to, the test is a test, and then you get the extra credit on top of it. You can't start with the extra credit and then see if you're going to work out everything else. So if you're neglecting many of the other things, maybe a greater merit is to try and do something that you're actually obligated to do than looking for something that you're not obligated to do to add to the merit of a departed parent. Because if you say, you know what, I have not been benching as often as I should, and every time I bench now it should be a merit for my parents' soul. That's great, but it's even greater than saying Kaddish, because you have to bench, you don't have to say Kaddish. And so you say to God, you know what, if there's something I'm supposed to be doing that I don't do all the time, now I'm doing it for the merit of my parent. God says, I've been waiting for you to do this. And how great, I can add that to your parents' bank account. Whereas with Kaddish, God says, well, look, it's a nice thing to do, but there's a whole list of things that you are missing. Why don't you try on one of those first? Let's try to do what we need to do first before we try to say, well, I also do. Everybody's got a job description. Every person. And fill your job description before you start looking for extra things outside of your job description. And so you say, well, but my job description won't do anything for my parent. It will if you want it to. So all you need to do is you need to say, I would like that to be for the elevation of my parent's soul. I'm doing this now because I want to elevate my parent's soul. What a wonderful thing. Okay, so that's another thing to keep in mind. And it's often the question is, and this is the part that becomes a little bit, I guess, not so popular. This part is unpopular. Often the question you need to ask yourself is not so much what will make me happy, but what do I think God wants for me and will make God happy? Because for many people, the feeling is, I want to do something for my parents. Great. Absolutely. Do whatever you can. As much as you can. You owe your parents your life. Do as much as you can to give your parents the merit. 100%. Okay, I feel, for me, I would feel better if I get to say Kaddish. Fine. What do you think you're missing most? Ask the question, what do I really need to do? Not what feels best for me if I were to do it. Because for us, we grow up so much. I think in general, I've heard people bemoan this. They say that shul has become almost the focal point of Anglo Jewry's life. And therefore, people who are not learned, people who can't daven, women often as well, feel excluded from Judaism. Because if Judaism is shul, and I have no role in shul, then I have no role in Judaism. Which is a pretty logical sequence, except for the fact that shul is not the only thing in Judaism. But if that's how you live your life and that's how it's sold to you, then you think, well, Judaism's all about shul, and how come I got no right to do anything in shul? So I'm nobody. I need to push myself to the front. I need to be able to be a chazan. I need to be able to daven. I need to be present. I need to do this and that. You don't. There's so many things you can do outside of this space that are really important. That build the Jewish people, that build other people, that build yourselves, that make God proud. And it's the same thing. People have been pushed so much in the idea of a parent passes away, you have to say Kaddish. And people who don't come to shul and who've never come to shul, you suddenly see them for 11 months and then they disappear again like you've never seen them before. Because you have to say Kaddish. Yes, you have to say Kaddish, but a lot of other things you have to do also. And you can do any of them, I would do the same thing. And ask yourself, because we've sold it as the only thing you can do for the elevation of the soul of a parent is to say Kaddish, therefore, a woman says, wait, why don't I get to elevate the soul of my parents? Only my brother gets to do it and I don't? That's not fair. And I hear that. It isn't. It isn't fair. Why should the men only be the only ones that can elevate the soul of their parents? Women, sorry, you sit and cook. But nobody ever said that. That's just the feeling that's given over. That's the vibe that's given over because it's not explained. So you feel, I've been left out. First of all, yes, you can say Kaddish. You want to go ahead, say Kaddish. But more importantly, the education needs to be, or the fact people need to be educated that Kaddish isn't the be-all and end-all of elevating your parents' soul. There's so much else you can do. So instead of saying, this is the only thing I can do and I don't want to be excluded, ask yourself the question, what does God want from me? What does he want me to do for the elevation of my parents' soul? And do some soul searching. Because I bet you that even the people that come every day to say Kaddish could do some soul searching and say, you know what? On top of Kaddish, there are many other things I could be doing as well. Because sometimes you say, look, it's easy to come to Kaddish. I like coming to davening anyway. I enjoy the social. I enjoy coming to davening. Kaddish is no sweat off my back. I'll come, I'll say Kaddish takes 15 minutes, half an hour for Mincha Ma'ariv. It's great. I go back home, finished, done. But if you went back home and did something else, that's where the work starts. It's much harder to do that. And then you do that soul searching. Both men and women do that soul searching and try to find a way that's going to be more complete, more all-encompassing than just Kaddish. That's even greater. So, one second. This we said already. And so I'll finish with the following, and then I'll take any questions if you want. Again, if you want to say Kaddish, both men and ladies, no, sorry, take it the other way around. Men, if you're supposed to be saying Kaddish, you need to come and say Kaddish. Ladies, if you want to come and say Kaddish, the door is open. You want to come, you're welcome to do so. But the main thing that I would say is, whether it is you're coming to say Kaddish, whether you're doing something else and giving charity, whether you're benching, whether you're davening, whether you're saying brachos, whether you're dressing different, whatever it is that you do, if you do it, if you do it because you say, God, I'm doing this for you, and I'm doing this as an elevation for my parents' soul, then it has meaning. If it becomes, and this is the other problem, and part of the reason that this becomes such a contentious issue is that Kaddish becomes, for certain people who feel that Judaism is misogynistic, Kaddish becomes like a battle cry. And therefore the problem is those people that are not even feminists, they just want to do something for their parents, get tarred with the same brush and they go, oh, you're just a feminist, aren't you? No, I'm not a feminist. I just want to say Kaddish for my parent. Yeah, you, and there's a thin end of the wedge. All those cliches that you always hear. And it's a shame because there are people out there that are out there to do it just because they want to prove they can do it. Let there be no mistake about it. Women aren't stupid. They can say Kaddish. It's not some kind of intelligence thing. Only men can figure out the difficult words and women can't read. Obviously not. Of course you can say Kaddish. It never had anything to do with intelligence or inability. It's a question of who's obligated to do what. You're not obligated, you don't need to do it. You want to come and do it, be my guest. But make sure that if you come and do it, it's not some kind of political call that's being made because I want to show people what I can do. Because then God says, look, Kaddish is not there. Kaddish is not some kind of political pawn. And if you start using Kaddish as a political pawn, then God says, really, in reality, your Kaddish loses all its value. Because once you take it and you turn it into a political pawn, then it becomes useless, right? Like you hear politicians. If a politician says something good about the Jews, great. But if you know the politician is not really into Jews, all he's doing is because he's in Broughton Park or he's in Prestwich, he made a speech and he says, my good friends, the Jews, and you know he doesn't like the Jews at all. What do you feel? You feel patronized. Well, God says, I'm not being patronized by you. I know what your Kaddish is or isn't about. So make sure if you want to say Kaddish, come and say Kaddish. Whoever wants to come and say Kaddish should come and say Kaddish, if they have to say Kaddish. But it's not there to score points, at least on a political scene. Do it for the right reasons. If you do it for the right reasons to elevate the soul, you do tremendous things for the soul of the person that's departed. Every Kaddish is worth who knows what to the parent. And so for the men, come as often as you can. For the ladies, there's plenty other things you want to do, you can do. You want to specifically come and say Kaddish, come and say Kaddish. But don't feel that Kaddish, you're tied down to this Kaddish. And if I don't say Kaddish to my parent will never get anything from me. It's just not true. There's so many other things you can do. And so many other things you should do. And if you do them, you'll make a huge difference to those people who have departed. This is my idea. Any questions, any comments? Please. Yeah, okay, David, you've not had a chance. Ian, you've had a chance.
That's a question.
Please.
You didn't answer it.
What was your question? Sorry.
The question was, why don't we encourage women to do it? And why don't we tell our members they can say Kaddish? Most of them think they can't.
They've never asked me the question. I mean,
I'm not saying they've asked you the question. I'm saying, why don't you go out and tell them?
So I personally, I don't think I don't think personally that Kaddish is sort of like where I would start. I would rather start with a woman at something more basic and get her to do something basic that she should be doing, rather than getting her to do something extra credit that she doesn't need to do.
Well, my guess is that there's a lot of women members of the shul
right,
who would actually say Kaddish if they were told that they can say Kaddish. Most of them think they can't.
Right. Okay. But I've never said that. I've never stood up and said.
That's what the rabbi's doing tonight, though. Surely.
I've never stood up and said nobody can say that women can't say Kaddish. We've had women say Kaddish.
I think what David's asking is, you attend the Shiva house for everybody.
Yes.
So, or the members. So, do you say to the women at that stage that if you want to come and say Kaddish, come and say Kaddish?
In general, I don't. I think really.
Say Kaddish at the Shiva.
I think what I should really be encouraging, in my opinion, what I really should be encouraging them to do is something else other than saying Kaddish, as what I just said, as they're more basic things. If they don't want to take anything else on, so then if they want to say Kaddish, they can say Kaddish. But I don't see it as something that I want to specifically encourage, because then people say, oh, I got to say Kaddish also, which is, again, it's an extra, especially for women. It's not something they need to do. And I'd rather be focusing on the things that they need to do rather than the extras that are just, nice, feel-good factors.
Again, where they haven't. There's no harm in it.
Again, as I said, if they want to.
If that's their thing,
yeah,
and it can bring them back into the fold again,
yes,
then it should be encouraged.
Okay, that's true. But in general, I don't know that so many people. I've not heard many stories of coming back into the fold from saying Kaddish. In general, yeah. Ronnie, I'm gonna look on the other side. Yeah.
Then again, so what happens at funerals where there's only daughters and they want to say Kaddish?
So again, the same thing like a funeral.
I mean, it doesn't apply. I mean, the same we said in shul where a woman wants to say Kaddish,
yeah,
the men saying Kaddish,
yes,
so they have a man to say Kaddish with her. Whereas a funeral is a different scenario.
No, so I'll ask at the funeral. I will ask somebody else to say Kaddish with the ladies. That's fine. So if a woman wants to say Kaddish at her parents' funeral, she can. All I will see is I'll see if I can find somebody else that's standing around as part of the minyan that can say the Kaddish, and they'll say Kaddish as a group, the ladies and this one man.
Why does it have to be a man saying it if there's more than one woman?
No, so it's what the Kaddish in general is, men answering for men, and women can tag along on that one. That's as far as the halachic framework goes.
But 10 men can't answer one woman.
No, 10 men cannot answer one woman. That's it. Anybody? Yeah, Robert.
Can I ask the question? Let's say during chapters, the Chazan says Kaddish 3-4 times.
Yes.
Also, Lorna, for somebody who's got Yurtzak, will also say Kaddish.
Yes.
You mentioned before about scoring points. Are we both on an equal footing?
Okay, so that's a good question. The answer to that is that's part of the reason why somebody who's an Abba wants to dan for the Amud. Because by davening for the Amud, you get to gain a lot more things that you don't get by just saying Kaddish at the end. So if you're just standing in the crowd and you're an Abba, and you just said Kaddish by Aleinu, so you got to say Kaddish by Aleinu. If you're davening, if you're the Shliach Tzibur, if you're the Chazan, you get to say Kaddish before Yishtabach, you get to say Baruch Hu, you get to say the Amida again, you get to say Kedusha, you get to say Kaddish again afterwards, you get to say Kaddish after Balatzin. So you get a lot more, which is why people try to be the Chazan when they're in Averis. So they're not, for that one Kaddish, then equal footing, but the fellow was the Chazan, got a lot more points over the entire davening than the other guy did. which is why people want it down for the Yom.
Yeah, but if you're just a hazard and you're not a mourner.
Correct. Okay, if you're just a chazan, not a mourner, then that's different. Yeah. Okay, so then that's different. Yeah, Jeff.
Well, I was saying as well. Why is it that it's only the obligation for the child to say it and not for the father to say Kaddish?
Okay, so in general, the obligation is as follows: that we have an obligation to try to influence or try to get our children to do certain things. That's my obligation towards my children. It is not the obligation of the parent. The child is not doesn't have an obligation to get the parent to do something. The parent has the obligation to get the child to do something. And so therefore the child can't say, oh, I left behind a parent that says Kaddish. It's not really, that was never the child's sort of job in this world. And therefore that's why the child says Kaddish for the parent, because that shows that the parent has left something behind, whereas the parent has no obligation to say Kaddish for the child, because it was never the parent's obligation. It was sort of not the obligation of the child to educate the parent.
But the parent can say it.
Yes, you can say it. If you have a parent can say it, Chas v'shalom, a parent in such a situation, he could say Kaddish, but he doesn't need to say Kaddish. It's not the same level of obligation. Yeah.
The Kaddish after Onenu,
Yeah.
even if there's no mourners in shul,
Yeah.
traditionally,
Somebody says Kaddish.
Someone should say Kaddish. Why just that one? What's the special status?
I'm not sure why that one is the one where they've chosen and said that's the Kaddish for the pardon?
No.
No. The first Kaddish after Aleinu, that's the first one where they sort of that's where they put that for some reason that's become a Kaddish. So they say the minhag is a mourners, but there should be Kaddish said then anyway, and the minhag has become that a mourner says Kaddish then. But if there's no mourner, then you should say Kaddish regardless.
But can it be something? Let's say it's
if there's no mourners, then it can be somebody else.
Shul.
Yeah.
If it's a young shul.
If the young shul, there's nobody there to say Kaddish, nobody there to Kaddish. What can I do? Yeah.
Well, how come you, for example, can
Yes.
say Kaddish if you're for the Omer,
Yes.
but not the mourners?
So the mourner's Kaddish is specifically, so I could even say the mourner's Kaddish. The halacha is as follows. If I get permission from my parents, I could say the mourner's Kaddish. It's considered very disrespectful to a parent for somebody who still has parents to say Kaddish. They say, what do you mean? You still have parents? But if I said to my parents, for whatever reason, I have to say Kaddish and Shul together, there's another lady and she needs to say Kaddish. I know, for example, there was an instance where there was a young girl in a certain school who lost a parent who was saying Kaddish, and there was nobody else to say Kaddish. So a friend of mine asked their parents and says, look, there's nobody to say Kaddish with her, and I want to know, can I say Kaddish so that this young girl could say Kaddish? And said, yeah, we don't mind. And so he said Kaddish with this young girl, and that's how she was able to say Kaddish for the whole year. So I could say Kaddish, in that instance. This Kaddish is specifically set aside for mourners, and as an honor to your parents, you don't say it. All the other Kaddishes are not mourners Kaddish as such, so then you can say it as a non-mourner as well.
Getting cold at John.
Getting cold at John. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions, please?
So why was the official